Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine with Pick and Pay and a little excursion on holiday from the studio this week, the cellar where we normally are, and instead at one of my favourite restaurants and one of the world's favourite restaurants, the Test Kitchen, Luke Dale Roberts' temple to all things wonderful when it comes to eating. It's a restaurant that has been the Eat Out #1 many times. It's also been in the world's 50 best restaurants list. It's an exceptional place to come for some of the finest food in South Africa. Luke Dale Roberts is an inventive man, he's an adventurous man, he's a slightly mad character sometimes when it comes to the food he makes, but the results are always unforgettable. But it's not just about the food at the Test Kitchen. In fact, and just keep this between the two of us, because if Luke finds out he'll be very cross with me, the food plays very much a second role to the wine here at the Test Kitchen, because they do have an exceptional wine list. Now, you've got two options if you come here for dinner. That's provided you can get in for dinner, because the current waiting list has me looking at my 70th birthday is pretty much the next time I can get a booking. But if you do get here, you can either order off the wine list, and it is an exceptional wine list, or you can choose the very carefully curated wine options that go with each of the dishes. And there are two of them. There's the gourmand, which is the slightly more inexpensive but often more interesting selection, because quite frequently it's wine that's just been dropped off or introduced, wine that's not quite so well known and finds its way for a month or two onto the menu. Alternatively, there is the iconic pairing, some very well known, some very big end, some very high brand wines that deliver both the recognizable factor as well as the exceptional taste factor. And they're all put together by a Zimbabwean. He's probably the greatest export Zimbabwe has had since Mazoe Orange. His name is Tinashe Nyamudoka, and Nyamudoka is a Shona word meaning to effortlessly combine food and wine to make it all taste amazing. My Shona needs a little bit of work, but I think that's what it means. And what I've done today is I've got Tinashe to give me 4 of the wines that are on the current tasting menu. And this is the menu here, the light drum, so the 4th of December. This was just a day or two ago. And I'm going to taste them and tell you what they would normally be drunk with. And it's a really cool selection. It's a couple of rosés, it's a Sauvignon Blanc, and it's a very light red from an estate that is used to giving you big, broad-shouldered, knock you off your feet red. So a really cool selection and a really interesting selection in terms of the food that they go with. So if you've been thinking of the Test Kitchen, if you've got a reservation and you're coming along, this will give you an idea of what to expect. If you haven't thought of it, well, here's a Christmas present for yourself. Get a reservation for 2020 and make it the definitive dining and wine experience you will have for the year. So the first of these wines is from Iona. Now, Iona's Sauvignon Blanc has become a go-to Sauvignon Blanc for many South Africans. It's a lovely, crisp, fresh Sauvignon Blanc. It's very easy to drink. Easy drinking often infers maybe it's a little bit cheaper, it's a little bit more expensive, it's not quite so good. In their case, it's easy drinking because it is exactly that. It's just a pleasure to drink. It's not too acidic. I really like it. And they've played off that Sauvignon Blanc by adding some Semillon to create the One Man Band. It's a really cool name, and it refers to the two wines coming together in concert and producing a white blend that I'm drinking quite a bit of as we move into summer. It keeps that freshness of the Sauvignon Blanc, but the Semillon gives it a bit of structure, gives it a bit more bite, and the combination is lovely. I had some creation at a dinner party the other night. Again, Sauvignon, Semillon working together really nicely. And this is one from Iona that does the job beautifully as well, but all the more so when in concert with food, because it is paired, as my menu tells me, with the swordfish belly Greek salad. Now, only Luke Dale Roberts could get away with throwing swordfish belly into a Greek salad and not having Greece end all political relations with South Africa. He's that good. And I've had this. I ate here a week or two ago. It was just beyond splendid. I arrived with high expectations and had them blown out the water by both the food and the wine. So I've had exactly this pairing. Tinashe gave it to me amongst the 37 other glasses of wine he made me have on the night. He's an evil man, but a wonderful one. And so this is a really nice wine. If you've always drunk Sauvignon Blanc, and there are a lot of people who do, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. A lot of people do like their Sauvignon Blanc, but if you'd like to branch out a little, this is your next step, your gateway into a broader white wine palette, taking those Sauvignon characteristics and then just enhancing them with Semillon. And really, really nicely done. You can sense that balance And you know that the wine is going to be balanced because you don't get past Tinashe unless your wine is balanced, and that has got exactly that. But you can also tell that as good as it is on its own, it's only going to be even more special with the right sort of dish. And the swordfish belly in a Greek salad, it's a beautiful dish to look at. It's very small, but it's an avalanche of flavors, and they play off this particular blend delightfully. One Man Band, well, I think it's got a third member of that band in the form of some swordfish belly in a Greek salad. So a good start in a lovely glass. This is a little narrow onto more of the balloon style glass, which just opens up, allows more wine to spread over the palate. And this here is really interesting. This is Adam Mason making his Yardstick wine, the Raised by Wolves. It's a really, really cool name. I don't know if he watched a lot of Jungle Book as a kid or just really liked the name. But this is the Muscat Blanc. And you can see from the colour, it's got that rich rosé. There's almost an orange hue to this particular rosé, and the muscat grape is immediately available on the nose. That sweetness of it, that richness of it, that Turkish delight of a muscat. And often you would expect that as a result it would be a very sweet wine. But I've got a sneaking suspicion that this particular wine is not going to be sweet, and it is paired with a lobster salad. So this has got an Eastern feel to it. It's coconut, it's Thai aromatics, it's lobster dressed up with some Far Eastern flair. And while the nose is quite sweet, I think it might be a fairly dry wine to play off that particular lobster salad dish. An understatement, it is even drier than I thought it might have been. This is basically drier than Cape Town was a year ago, but far more palatable. And it gives you a little bit of a shock if you're not expecting it, because the nose says, whoa, dessert wine, but on the palate you get something else entirely. And I love that contradiction. It adds to the fun of drinking, and the wine that you are drinking in the end is going to work so nicely with that lobster salad. So an unusual wine, you don't see a lot of it. It's one that Adam Mason clearly decided he wanted to have a bit of fun with, and it's one that the test kitchen have liked the results of, and so do I. Okay, so that's one of the pinks out the way. That is the rosé to go with the lobster salad. Then a second rosé, and this is one I had to do some inquiring about, and I asked Tinashe about this particular wine, and this is how professional he is. He said he hadn't had any since last week, so he opened it, and that is what Tinashe tasted just to make sure he was happy with it. So this was opened 20 minutes ago, and the resident Zimbabwean wine expert has polished off just over half of it, merely to give me an appraisal and his thoughts on this particular wine. It is the Elmie. It's a guy called Reg Holder out in Stellenbosch, and I love this story. Reg managed to get Tinashe's number from somebody, called him, pitched up, dropped off some wine, and it speaks both to the entrepreneurial spirit of Reg, that he came and found the test kitchen, best restaurant in town, and asked if he could leave his wine with them, but also of Tinashe, a man who himself got some great opportunities from other people, so giving opportunities to a wine that I hadn't heard of, a lot of people won't have heard of, but met with great favour. So it's the Elmie Rosé, and this is a wine that goes with the Sunday roast, but needless to say, it's not quite the Sunday roast you'd expect. It is a beef tartare, it has some horseradish, and it's a throwback to the youth of Luke Dale Roberts, which is many years ago. Again, the glass is specifically chosen. I think Tinashe's actually got a master's in glassware amongst his many other attributes. So where the previous wine had got that really sweet nose, this is a lot more savoury, and that's to be expected because this is from pinotage. And at the risk of greatly offending those people who do make pinotage, and there are a lot of them who make some lovely pinotage, some of the rosé pinotage I've had is the best use of the grape I've encountered in the last year or two. It just adds a little more depth to a wine that can sometimes be a little frivolous or, God forbid, a little too sweet. But that, certainly on the nose, has got a really nice balance. But it's also got to have enough structure, enough meat to it if it's going to go with a Sunday roast dish, and in this case a beef tartare. You're having very lightly smoked beef, you need some wine to go with it. Normally you'd think, right, well, I'm throwing a red wine at this, but a pinotage rosé, that's an inspired choice, and inspiration's fairly common around here. That is lovely. First thing is the temperature is absolutely perfect. It's cool enough for a hot day in Cape Town in a very warm restaurant, but it is not so cold that you're losing the array of flavour. And that depth of pinotage has got a lovely little bite at the end of it, just as it hits the end of your palate. And again, a lovely structure. All these wines, that's just that sense of balance. And I know that it's going to go so nicely with that tartar. I've had the tartar before, not with this wine. It wasn't on the offerings when I had it last time around. But it's certainly a really cool, a really different, a really fun wine to pair with that beef tartar. Reg Holder, nice work. All right, and then on to the last of them. And this is a wine that sits in a very different space to the rest in the stable. The de Toren wine is well liked by Tinashe. He made vast amounts of money as a waiter, flogging it to tourists at assorted restaurants that he worked at. But the de Toren, normally it is their V and their Z, and then they've got a couple of particular wines, the Book 17, for instance. They've also got the Black Lion. They cost like 2,500 to 3,000 rand a bottle. These are not bottles that you open with your spaghetti bolognese on a Tuesday evening. These are wines for your 50th birthday and for your wedding anniversary, and when South Africa win a Cricket World Cup, things that very, very, very rarely, if ever, happen. So why is this one so different? Well, this is the Délicate. There's a little accent on the E to make it sound a little bit more French. It's Délicate. And it is delicate indeed when it sits alongside the rest of the de Toren stable. And I really do like the de Toren Reds. It is exceptional wine. It's wine that ages beautifully and consistently, the whole range, some of our best. I had some of the new release of that Book 17 earlier on this year. There were about 8 security guards around each bottle. It's that expensive, but gee, it's good stuff. So this is a departure. This is offering you something that's lighter, it's softer. The kind of red wine you can pop in the fridge for half an hour just to chill down on a summer's day if you don't feel like a glass of white. And that is, it's got a real softness to it. It's kind of like drinking a slightly older Merlot, or not quite a Pinot Noir, but it's just got that real smoothness to it that there's no appreciable tannin to it. It just slides down really, really easily. And that's exactly what they're setting out to do. It's a more easily priced wine if you can't afford the slightly more expensive stuff at the upper end of the de Toren range. And it's also a wine that has quite an interesting food pairing, because this is a special at the moment at the test kitchen. It's going with sweetbreads. Not everybody's first choice of food. The bits of an animal they've decided to give a nice name to and serve up with all sorts of additions to make it look cool, but a delicacy in many cultures and communities. And Luke does do his sweetbreads particularly well. And again, you've got a wine here that is, I think, going to bring out the best of them without overpowering. And that's the job, really, of a top sommelier. When pairing, the food is always going to take precedence in terms of its creation. That comes first. What is the wine you then find that's going to bring the best out of that food without overpowering it or itself being overpowered? Your big challenges like a curry or something very spicy make it quite difficult. But whatever dish it is, and with the sweetbreads, you've got a particular flavour, you've got a particular style of cooking, and you've then got to find something that goes with it. And that reminds me of a point that my good friend Pete Goffwood, the chef, makes regularly. When you pick up a bottle of wine and you read the back of it and it says, goes great with lamb. Well, how are you cooking your lamb? What herbs are in your lamb? What style of lamb is it? What cut of lamb is it? It's a very generic statement to make. Whereas when you find a sommelier, like you've got in Tinashe at the Test Kitchen, every dish is specifically paired with the wine that a lot of thought and a lot of careful effort and consideration has gone into. Not that you need food for these wines, all 4 of them are quite delightful on their own, but when paired with the dishes mentioned, they just enhance that whole experience. So maybe that's something to do over the course of the next few weeks as you've hopefully got a bit of holiday, you've gone down to Pick n Pay, you've stocked up with food for the holiday season. Try some new wine, try some different wine, be a little inventive, be a little creative. Try some rosé with some red meat, try some red wine with some tuna, have a go at some white wine with a piece of steak. You might be surprised at how well a Chardonnay or a Chenin Blanc can go with a curry. Do some experimenting and make good use of the fact that hopefully by now you are a member of that Pick and Pay Wine Club, getting all those extra smart shopper points and getting the opportunity to get some great wines at great prices and then pairing them up with some food. It might not be Luke Roberts style food, but the right food and the right wine at home, and you're only going to have an enhanced experience. Big thank you to Luke and Tinashe for the time here at the Test Kitchen. I look forward to be back again, trying some more of their fabulous food and their fabulous wine, and enjoying what really is the definitive eating experience here in Cape Town. Cheers.